Our team worked with Lidl, which is a grocery store chain based in Europe. It was an amazing opportunity. We got to visit some of their stores. So wanted to start off with a couple of pictures and some selfies of us visiting some of their stores in the United States and getting tours, getting to really get to know the company before we dug into the data. This was a really great effort. So our team was actually split between China, United States, and Canada. We worked across time zones and persevered. It was a really great experience. So just to introduce this group to Lidl, Lidl started in 1973 and in 2017 came to the United States. So they currently have 111 stores and 3 regional distribution centers, all on the East Coast. We worked with Lidl to address these 3 key business questions. So we were looking at whether there were regional differences in purchasing behaviors. We also looked into some local heroes or locally preferred brands or articles across different regions. And then we also did a clustering exercise where we looked at potential clusters that they could use to specialize their distribution strategy in the future. So this is an overview of the data we worked with. We worked with a really large data set, and what made this really unique is that Lidl has really strong data on their customers. So we were looking at receipt level analyses, which were just essentially all the items produced on a receipt each time a customer visited a store. So mass amounts of data, and Lidl is really unique in that they have this really strong data on their customers and had these key business questions that focused on asking the Wharton Customer Analytics team to really dig into their data and notice some trends. Whereas some other companies in the industry would rely on competitive data to draw these types of analyses, Lidl has really strong data. So the first section is going to focus on the different price zones that Lidl provide us and the customer behaviors and patterns we dug into across these price zones. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 111 stores on the East Coast of the United States. And then Lidl recently identified some price zones based on data to segment the stores into a distinct number of price zones. We looked at the variation of items across these price zones. And the methodology we used here was really to start really broadly. So look at all products in what we called product category 1 in the data. So that is like, this is a chilled product or an ambient product. And then we dove in and looked at fruits and vegetables. And then we got even more specific and looked at fruits. And then we went even more specific to that, looked at exotic fruits, and then narrowed it down to avocados, which is the case study that we're going to present in part for you today. And then in parallel, we're kind of narrowing it down from regional to store level to really understand the dynamics of this specific product. And I have to mention that some of the data has been removed from this presentation, so I can fill you in as we go along. But as we narrowed it down to avocados, it was interesting to look at the receipt level patterns of avocados across their zones. So on the left-hand side, we can look at loose avocados. So as you can see here, we have the majority of customers buying loose avocados, buying 2 or fewer avocados. And then on the right side, we're looking at bags of 4 avocados. And you can see the majority of customers are purchasing less than 2, so 1 bag of avocados. And that's just interesting to understand customer behaviors. But then we were thinking of the question, okay, so is this one customer buying a lot of avocados or a few customers? What is it, one customer buying a lot of avocados or a few customers buying a lot of avocados? So we then looked at customer ID and we segmented based specifically on the customer. So you can see on the left-hand side here that if we're looking at loose avocados, that each customer is purchasing fewer than 2 avocados, but there's a long right tail here. So there are some customers who are purchasing large quantities of avocados. And then similarly, we looked at the bags of 4 on the right, and you can see a similar trend. So the value in doing this is that we can provide Lidl, and we're still continuing to refine our method, and we're going to provide them with our code, and they can theoretically apply this to different to different products to understand customer behaviors within a specific product. So our key recommendations and next steps based on this portion of the project is that there's value by tracking by customer. So when we talked about the receipt level analysis versus the customer level analysis, there were some interesting trends that were customer based. Additionally, we used our methodology to narrow down that avocados are an important driver of traffic. And we recommend looking more at what is in the baskets or in the receipts of customers that were purchasing a large number of avocados to see if we can run any promotions or similar strategies to understand this customer better. And then lastly, I didn't present this because it was confidential, but we did run some store analyses as well, looking inside these zones to see underperforming and overperforming stores. So we can, again, run promotions or certain strategies to address these underperforming and overperforming stores and try to really understand the dynamics on that. So that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Sydney, who was responsible for the clustering portion of the project, which was really aside from Lidl's price zones, identifying our own clusters to be able to notice trends.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you for your presentation. So hi, everyone. This is Sydney, and I'm in charge of identifying the individualization clusters, namely store clusters that share the similar shopping patterns and target customers. So we used the data set from August 2019 to July 2020. And we were conducting our analysis on the receipt data level. And as we built our model, we considered different features. Well, from the product side, we considered each store's revenue that came from the product categories, and as well as the special product categories, namely vegan food, vegetarian food, and organic food, etc. From the customer side, we consider the transaction of each store. And this is generated by the count on the receipt. And after some data wrangling, we were able to generate the sales proportion of each product category of each store. And we decided to use the k-means clustering for our final model. We also tested out hierarchical clustering and Dobson algorithms as the go-to algorithm for clustering task, but we decided to stick with k-means clustering. Next slide, please. And when it comes to the features of our models, we first tested out various feature subsets to build our cluster models upon. So basically, what we did was we first compared clustering results to determine whether we're going to use absolute revenue or revenue percentages. And we decided that we were going to use the revenue percentages for our k-means clustering. And the next step was to build a pipeline for finding the optimal feature weighting. And as for this step, we used the silhouette coefficients and the allowable finder in our k-means clustering. And we made a slight modification to our k-mean clustering. And actually, this is called the weighted k-means to balance between accuracy and meaningfulness. So, and the major issue we faced was to balance between the weighting of geographical locations and the sales proportion of each store. And eventually, we incorporated the revenue percentages of 68 product categories and as well as the geographical locations of each store. And from this graph, plot of the latitude and longitude, you can see the final result of our model. So we determined that the optimal cluster number is 5 clusters, and we use a locational weight of 10. And the way we found this optimal locational weight is to use an array of different locational weights and see at which locational weight the cluster becomes integral, and we can see a defined distinction between each cluster. And that's all for the clustering section of Lidl's project.
And that's the conclusion of our presentation as well.
I was muted. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Sydney. Again, wonderful journey. I know since I was a mentor, great journey. A couple of questions. I'll start with one that is on chat, and I'll add some of my own as well. I'm looking at the time. I think we have a few minutes. Jay asks on chat, how did the team decide on focusing on avocados?
So this is some of what we were unable to present in our public presentation, but essentially we started really broadly and looked at all categories, and we ran descriptive analyses against the data to look at the average across all Lidl stores of each category of products. So fruits and vegetables versus on-the-shelf products versus those in the refrigerator, starting really broad and noticing where there are trends in the various price zones that they gave us. Then we narrowed it down from that and went one category more detailed and looked at that. So then we started looking only at fruits. Then we looked across the fruits and noticed that exotic fruits had variation across the price zones. And then within exotic fruits, we did another analysis and we noticed that avocados had variation across the price zone. So we were really trying to identify products that showed patterns so that we had something to really dig into and look for specific details. So avocados is just one of many products that demonstrated that variation.
Great. Thank you, Abby. No, I think one of the things also I'll add, I think we have a few minutes as well. Please, again, for other participants, some of you, I know some of us might be driving and listening, so it might be hard for you to put it on chat. I hope you don't drive. But those of us who are on your computers, please put questions on chat. I'll ask one to the team. Again, it'll be great, Abby, from your point of view and the others' point of view as well. Coordinating things, of course, is always hard, but even more so during the virtual environment. Any things that you have as a takeaway from your team, kind of, just for others to understand, because they're all part of different companies and they would love to hear from a student's point of view, coordination in a remote environment.
Does anybody from our team want to step in on that one? Okay, I'll take that one then. So it was definitely an interesting experience working across time zones. So if you noticed, half of our team was based in China and the other half between the United States and Canada, all on Eastern time. So some strategies we used were, firstly, we had some early morning meetings. And secondly, we were able to kind of divide the work between those based in Eastern time zone and then those based in China, so that we were able to collaborate more on normal business hours and then coming together twice a week to share our findings and provide feedback for one another.
Wonderful. I think this is also, as we are going through these times now, but I'm sure work environment has perhaps changed quite significantly even in the next coming few months. I think some of these experiences that people have had during this accelerator will perhaps serve them as they go into the work environment, because that's probably what many of us might see. So thank you, Abby. Thank you to the team as well.